I think a lot of visionaries they're not really concerned about the finances, not really concerned about what's being spent, and I think that's honestly necessary to just get a company off the ground and to really push forward through the just the starting stages of a company. So,
hey guys, welcome to another conversation here on Aleph Ventures TV. My name is Håkan Hansen. I am the Director of Development at Aleph, and today I have the privilege of being joined by our CFO, Erich Leidel. Erich, thanks for being on.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Håkan.
Yeah, man. All right, so obviously as CFO, you lead the financial strategy and execution of what we have going on here at Aleph. And maybe let me kind of tee up a conversation that I thought would be interesting and something I've been thinking about, and I think we deal with day in and day out. So as I said, when it comes to finance, CFO's job, there's financial strategy, and then there's execution of that strategy. And I think that in a painting business, one of the things that we've learned, we say this to ourselves and to our partners often, these businesses are not super complicated. Like the financial strategy around a painting business is not, crazy complex, which is one of the reasons we love the industry.
Yeah.
So you really, it's not so much it's not so much about strategy, though strategy is important. It's far more about execution. And as is most cases, but I think people feel maybe intimidated by finance and they think they major on the strategy in their mind. Meanwhile, they're not executing. And execution is all about behaviors. And so I think that it was a conversation I wanted to have with you of what are the behaviors around, financial, execution of a sound financial strategy in a business. So we'll get into that, but maybe before we do that, for folks who haven't met you, they don't know you, maybe just give a little background, kind of who you are, where you're from, and then too, how you came to be here at Aleph.
Yeah, for sure. Erich Leidel, CFO of Aleph Holdings. I am married. I've got 3 kiddos, a 10-year-old boy, 7-year-old boy, and a 5-year-old daughter. Pretty active lifestyle with sports and all sorts of activities outside of work. Originally from Wisconsin, so I'm a big Packer fan.
Boo.
Go Pack. And moved up here to Minneapolis to go to college. So I'm to the University of Minnesota up here, and then obviously I've just been up here ever since. And I actually, while I was in college, I was introduced to College Pro Painters. So I ran a College Pro Painting franchise for a year. And during that time, that's where I met Jason Paris. We ran a franchise together our first year. So not together, but at the same time. And that's where I met Jason. And a lot of the guys here I've known for many, many years from college, or my wife went to college with some of the wives of the other guys here. So there's a lot of connections to a lot of the founders and partners of Paris Painting and Aleph. And I originally, I came over in 2020. So I was working a finance job. I did that out of college and did that for a good decade, and watched the growth of Paris over the years, and was just super excited about what was happening, and thought maybe someday it'd be awesome to come join the team. But I don't know if that's a reality. But long story short, it became a reality, and I quit my job March 2020 and joined the team right before everything shut down in COVID. So interesting time for sure.
Yeah. Just to hang on that, I remember talking to you at some point, and it was like, you were coming from a finance career, pretty solid career, pretty stable, and you were kind of making this leap into small business, and it was like, what could happen, or you're kind of running the what if scenarios. And how long was it where like the state shut down? You had been an Aleph employee partner employee for how long? And then
Yeah, a week. I mean, I just so I just remember sitting on the couch with my wife and be like, okay, should we make the move? I had a pretty secure job, nice benefits, nice comp package, but wanted to do something different, take a risk, and it was like, hey, if there's ever a risk to take in life, I think this is the jump to make. But playing through the worst case scenario, what was the worst that could happen? Hey, maybe the stock market crashes 50% and nobody wants to paint their house. That's probably the worst case scenario. And if that happened, would I still do it? And the answer was yes. And so made the decision to come over, and this is like right as COVID is ramping up and people are starting to get concerned. And literally the Monday I started, I was at the bank getting my name on the accounts, and the stock market is down like 20% because people are freaking out on COVID. And that whole week was, and then the next day we closed on purchasing the building that we're in. So we signed a big mortgage.
Yeah, this building.
This building, yep. And then that whole week was pretty chaotic. And I think that Friday everything got shut down. So that was my first week on the job.
Well, and that's actually, that anecdote is maybe a good dovetail into the conversation, because COVID turned out to be pretty good for our business. Actually, those year, 2020 was not a bad year. We actually saw some growth. Not all companies did. And I think some companies went back. Now, obviously there's extenuating circumstances. There's a lot of situations and circumstances that I'm not aware of or are, region specific. Yeah. But I think by and large, it was, for those who had the opportunity and executed on the opportunity, it actually turned out to be good. And so again, that was just even an example of like, it's kind of what you execute. So a good book that I read recently is The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel. He's written on investing and finance and stuff like that. He talks about in that book that, you think when it comes to finance, all of the stuff that happens around finances on intricate spreadsheets and all that stuff. And he's like, yep. It's not really where finance happens. It really happens in between your ears. It's all about behavior. So again, to jump into that, when you look at the financial health of a painting business, what comes to mind as far as what are some behaviors when it comes to execution? Like, what are some of the things that you have to do and do well or do consistently that lends itself to being in a healthy financial situation in your business?
Yeah, I think, there's a lot of things I could say to that. One thing that we do at Aleph and I also do personally is just making sure that you've got the right data, right? Are you looking at clean data? Are you actually tracking data? Are you collecting information to actually make good decisions going forward? I do that personally with my finances. Obviously, we do that with the companies as well. I think it's also about just being, you and I talked about this before, but just, I think for me personally, I like to create a lot of order out of things that are chaotic. So if things are growing and it's a startup and things, tend to be disorganized, I feel like my skill set or my strengths, I like to create organization, process, structure, and make sure things are in the right buckets. And then I think, finding value in either the things that you're spending money on or the things that you're investing in. And so, we make a lot of investments here at Aleph and also personally making investments, and you don't want to overpay for those investments. You want to make sure that they're good. There's going to be a good ROI on it, but it's also the same with your expenses. And I think I'm pretty dialed into what we're spending money on and are we getting a return for that? And is there a better thing that we could be spending money on?
Sure. So whenever you came into the fold, what were some of the early things that you saw of kind of bringing order to some of the chaos? And again, maybe in terms of what kind of behavior do you think that you instilled that maybe what wasn't there?
Yeah. Um, yeah, I think, yeah, again, a number of things that when I came in, I think we just needed to be cleaned up. We had a few different companies under our holding company. There's a lot of intercompany spend that was happening. So expenses in this company that were for the other company, cleaning a lot of that up and creating the separation that was needed. Also simplifying the tools and the systems we had. We were running 2 payroll systems and we only needed one. We didn't need both. And honestly, we were overpaying for the one that we didn't even need. So be able to just switch that out and take the time that's needed to just create that separation and to create that clarity. And then I think there was a whole ton of expenses that we just, whether it was a recurring expense or things we were spending money on that, hey, are we actually using this? Like, let's dig in and cancel the stuff that we're not using, or, purchase a cheaper system if we needed to. So I think there was a lot of that. I was just going line by line through all the expenses that we were paying for every month and making sure we're getting the best return out of that.
Sure. And now, is that, would you say that that's something that you just kind of, kind of comes natural to you, or how have we maybe like systematized that a little bit? Because like today, you're not necessarily the one going line by line, but I'm thinking about how to, knowing you
Yeah.
can geek out on that a little bit of
Yeah.
kind of that finding value. But as we've grown, it's a lot. So
Yep.
what does it look like to systematize that kind of order, systematize that, digging for value, finding that? What does that look like on your team?
Yeah. I think honestly, it probably starts with just culture. That's just, yeah, me and the things that we've talked about. Really, for me, it's like I'm trying to find value and trying to find return wherever I can in life, whether that be personal or business. And I think that's the culture I bring into the company. It's the culture I bring into the team. So when we bring on new employees or the team that we have, I mean, it's everyone on the team is making sure, hey, do we need to spend money on that? Or, hey, money would be better spent this way. And I think it's just something we continually voice as a team and continually try to find. So yeah, we put in like pretty detailed month-end processes to review all of our expenditures every month, and to make sure that there's at least eyes on every single thing that we're doing financially in the company. And I used to review every single expense that came in, like every day, and allocate it. And then as we grow, like obviously there's a team of people doing that now, but creating a system where I can actually, I'm not allocating and reviewing every day, but I've got a system to review it every month and make sure that everything looks good and we're on track with where we want to be.
Yeah. What would you say? I mean, we work with, a bunch of different owners. And as we see, most of the folks who start a painting company are more, they're visionaries. They tend to be that kind of archetype of a human. What are some behaviors that you would say, lovingly, maybe to some of our current partners, but maybe behaviors that you see folks struggle with, that gets them into financially more tenuous situations in their business?
Yeah, it's and I think I say this as like everybody has their own skill set in life. And so visionaries, I don't think have a very strong attention to detail. And that's not a fault. That's their mind and their abilities are focused on really driving the value of the business. And so I think a lot of visionaries they're not really concerned about the finances, not really concerned about what's being spent. And I think that's honestly necessary to just get a company off the ground and to really push forward through the just the starting stages of a company. So I think that's great. But when we talk about some of the things that are missed, it's really hey, what is the month-end review that you're doing on all of your expenditures? Are you actually reviewing your financial reports? Are you interpreting your financial reports? Do you know what the data is actually telling you? And do you know where you're going? And I think a lot of that for for small business owners and for entrepreneurs, that gets missed a lot as you're just grinding, trying to start up the company and move from one thing to the next.
Yeah. Well, and I would say, and this was something I wanted to talk about too, just the overlap in terms of habits and behavior around whenever you have a small business, it's so akin to just the identity of a founder. And so much of, especially in the early stages, so much of what the business is like is kind of what they're like, right? Just in general.
Yep.
And I see a lot of overlap as I've gotten to know folks and had these conversations, and we go through due diligence and look at things that oftentimes how their business financial situation looks like has a lot of overlap to their personal financial situation. That can be the case. And just some of the habits and things like that. Maybe if you don't mind, just what have been some of your own like personal influences or of how to handle your personal finances? Are there books? Are there people that you met, or is that something that like your parents talked about? What is it like just your kind of personal practices that maybe influence some of what you do on the business side?
Yeah, I think, for sure. On the business side, growing up, I grew up in a family that was a pretty frugal family. So very conscious about what we're spending money on. My grandparents were they grew up in the Depression. And so that was the framework in which they lived their whole life. They saved money, stuffed it away. Actually, they made quite a few investments and that did well for them over the years too. But they didn't spend money on anything. And so that's like the culture that my parents grew up in. And then I think they carried that with them as they raised me and my brother. And we were we lived a great life, like a lot of vacations, a lot of fun stuff, but also just didn't spend money on anything that was that we didn't value or that just didn't feel like it was there was a lot of return there. And I think that really ingrained into me, and I carried that with me in my personal life. But then that's just probably why I got into finance and accounting in the first place, was because of that. And my dad's actually an accountant too. So a lot of this, there's like a lot of, I think just of my childhood and being raised in that environment has led to that.
Sure. How about, just when it comes to like, you mentioned what people are good at, or maybe what people are naturally given towards.
Yeah.
I see at times maybe a hesitance to engage a bookkeeper or like use another service, or owners, kind of tend to do a lot themselves. What are your thoughts on when somebody should engage a bookkeeper? To what degree should they engage a financial, resource? Just how to evaluate, like, hey, should I be doing this myself, or should I use, help?
Yeah. There's different stages to a company's growth. And obviously when you're first starting out, it can be hard depending on resources and budgets to pay somebody else to do the work, but eventually you got to get there. And even maybe if you can't afford it for the time being, it makes sense to pay somebody else to do it so that the owner can focus on what they're good at, whether it be sales or leading people or training, coaching, whatever it may be. And it depends on what the cost of that is. So I think for a bookkeeper, the cost to outsource that or to hire a third party, it's relatively inexpensive compared to maybe an owner or a founder doing that and that consuming their time when it could be used better elsewhere. And then at Aleph, this is not an Aleph concept, but it's a business concept, trying to get 5 names and 5 seats. We have visionary, integrator, sales, ops, and finance. And so finance is usually, probably the last of those 5 seats to get filled.
Mm-hmm.
But when you can get to a point where you've scaled enough, you've grown enough, and you're able to afford that role, it can make a huge difference in the company to just get that entire responsibility off of a founder or owner's plate.
Yeah, no, that's great. What would you, as as somebody is maybe evaluating a bookkeeper, checking them out, like what would be some like questions you would maybe encourage somebody to ask or make sure that they are paying attention to this? Because I'll tell you, man, like when in the world of bookkeepers, I think there's some good outfits. Bookkeeping for painters is one
Mhm.
that definitely makes the rounds in our industry, and even some, I think a couple partners of ours like use them.
Yep, they do.
They're great. Daniel Honan runs that group, but sometimes you get into the world of my aunt here in town, does some
Yep.
bookkeeping, and hey, to all the aunts out there, if you're doing great, like all the power to you. However, sometimes folks don't know what they don't know when it comes to what a bookkeeper should do, and just financial strategy in that sense. So, is there some low hanging fruit or some boxes you'd want to check if somebody was, hey, they came to a conclusion, I should really find some help for myself, and they go shopping for a bookkeeper? How would you direct them to analyze that?
Yeah, I think to start, it'd be asking someone, hey, what's the deliverable or what's the end goal every month that we're going to produce? And if you can kind of begin with the end in mind in that, it really helps you to understand, can they do the work that's needed to get there? Is that even on their framework? Because you have bookkeepers that, yeah, they can allocate transactions in QuickBooks, right? That's not hard. But to get it so that you can actually review a financial statement at the end of the month with the information laid out in a way that's helpful, that's different, and not everybody does that. So being
Hmm.
able to find a bookkeeper that doesn't just allocate transaction, but also organizes your financial reports so you can make sense out of it. And so
Hmm.
I think it's, yeah, beginning with the end in mind. What is the deliverable? And then ask them, how is this information, or how can you put this in a way that's going to help me make better decisions every month based on what you're producing? I think that's
Yeah.
a great way to lead into it.
Yeah.
Because
Um,
a lot of people, I'll just say this, because a lot of people will hire a bookkeeper thinking, yeah, this is going to solve all of my problems. I don't have to think about finances. And
mhm.
that's just not the case. You need to be thinking about finances, but you need to be, uh, yeah, you can't just not think about it. You need somebody to do the heavy lifting and getting the reports generated. But then you as a business owner need to understand those reports. And if you don't, your bookkeeper should be helping you understand it, right?
Right. Right.
And you need to be making good business decisions from those reports. And if you're not, you're really missing out on a crucial system and rhythm in your business.
I mean, and that's exactly what I think sometimes people who maybe feel like, they whatever, they have less financial exposure, education, maybe it's just not their thing,
Yeah.
Like I actually got an accounting degree, so my undergrad is in accounting. Um, I would say even with that, like corporate finance and stocks, and it's not really, I just don't geek out on it. I don't think it's super cool. Small business stuff and business strategy, tactical strategy, I like that stuff.
Yeah.
But Wall Street, I'm just not interested, and it can be intimidating sometimes, um, for folks. But they can think that it's something bigger than it is. And this strategy, this miraculous strategy, if I have the right bookkeeper, the right strategy, that is going to lead to good things in my business. But
Hmm.
really, the whole goal of finance is just to provide clarity to act and make decisions
Yes.
and do other things. The
Yep.
finance itself doesn't make, finance doesn't make business happen in the sense of, it doesn't sell jobs and produce work. And, it's all about telling the story, creating clarity. I think people
Yep.
mix that up.
They do. Yep. Absolutely. And I also think they're wanting to maybe check the box instead of actually
Sure.
um, to use it for the good. It's like, hey, I'm getting the financial reports every month. I didn't look at it, but I at least know I got the report. It's sitting in my inbox, and my bookkeeper said it's done. So I feel good about that. And hopefully they know where all the money is, because I don't.
Yeah.
You can't afford to do that as a business owner. And if you're gonna hire a bookkeeper or an outsourced solution, you got to be sure that these people can help you understand the information as well.
Yeah.
And then there's another whole nother layer to it, right? There's the financial report, but then also what are the KPIs that are being generated from the report? So, we at Aleph have a ton of KPIs that we look at every month. I mean, obviously, gross margin is a big KPI. Something that we look at all the time is something called cost on margin. So we're looking at cost on margin. This is how much it costs our sales and marketing team to produce the margin that is coming into the business. And that's a relatively new concept that we've introduced. It's a concept that we've been talking about quite a bit in the last year or two. And I don't know if there's a more important KPI in a small painting business that we're looking into. That can tell us a lot about how much it's going to cost and how much it's going to produce in margin for the next year.
So flesh out that metric a little bit.
Yeah.
You said like the sales and marketing to produce the margin. What do you mean by that?
Yeah. So we got our marketing costs. Obviously, that's how much it costs for us to generate leads, how much it costs for us to just do general marketing things like signs and vehicle wraps, things like that. And then we've got our sales team. So we're paying our sales team a base salary. We're paying them a commission. All of that together, that sales and marketing costs, that is just add all that up, whatever you're paying on sales and marketing in your business. And you look at that number and then you look at how much gross margin you have produced from those expenses. Then you're able to derive a percentage. What is the cost? So what is the sales and marketing cost divided by the margin? And you get a KPI. So in our case, what we've seen is if you can produce margin on a 35% cost from your sales and marketing team, that's a pretty good metric. And we've kind of dialed that in and tested that out in many different businesses. And that seems to be a very healthy number to hit. And in a lot of cases, you can hit well below that if you're running a very lean, tight ship. But a 35% benchmark is pretty solid.
So most folks are more used to looking at their sales cost or certainly their marketing as a percentage of revenue.
Yes.
This is moving it down to looking at it as a percentage of gross profit or gross margin.
Yep.
What about that is like more beneficial, or how does that, why do we like looking at it that way?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the big thing is because sales and marketing costs can get way out of hand, and you really don't know how much it's going to cost to generate a certain amount of revenue. Even if you do generate the revenue, you want to incentivize your sales team to sell at a higher margin. And so if you're tying their sales cost to the cost on margin, it's a great incentivizer for the sales team to overperform, but also to keep them in line with the same goal that everybody has, which is producing margins at 40+%. And then it also can help us, like intra months, it can help us kind of predict how much should we increase our marketing spend, because our actual cost on margin is lower. We could actually increase that spend right now, maybe produce a lot more margin later on this year. So really it's a leading indicator for us, but it's also, we reevaluate that every single month as we're looking at it to decide if we should increase or decrease our marketing spend.
Sure. Yeah, because you can, in theory, you can sell yourself right out of business if all of your sales are just not profitable. Like if you're losing money, right, on your sales. And then I've also heard it talked about too, when it comes to, hey, what should your marketing budget be? It's kind of like, well, your marketing budget, if it's profitable work, you can have an infinite marketing budget.
Yeah, if it's working, spend more.
Right. So having that kind of clarity is helpful. Okay, so One of the things, so before I came onto the team, I spent 4 years working in corporate finance. And so I supported business units at a Fortune 100 company. And I was kind of in supply chain finance. So we're reporting on the financial performance of business units and costs and things like that. And it was always interesting because I didn't do anything to like influence the numbers. I was like the weatherman
Yeah.
in large part. But there is this element of, again, it comes down to behavior. The whole point of, why I was there was to provide clarity to influence behavior. Um, you know, for maybe for folks that have a little bit larger businesses, or business owners that are moving into a place where they're out of the daily grind of the business and they
Mm-hmm.
are able to have, right, they have a good financial management system and maybe a team supporting them, or maybe they just have more of the bandwidth to do some of that analysis. Now they actually have to bring that influence, because maybe they have project managers that are they're grinding and it's hard
Yeah.
for them to appreciate margin, or they have a marketing team that's just doing a ton of stuff and they're not really tracking the numbers, or they don't have kind of that clarity. I don't know. What have you learned about like influencing your team from a finance perspective? Like, just there's the data that you get, but then there's maybe the art of like creating clarity. How do you go about that as a finance leader?
Yeah. I mean, and are you talking about with the finance team or just the whole company
The
creating
whole
influence?
company,
Yeah.
right?
Okay.
So
Yeah.
influencing the sales division, influencing the production division, bringing that clarity of, here's the financial picture, here's maybe what we need to do about it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. I think, if you look at Paris Painting and you look at, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I mean, the margin that we were producing, it was a decent amount of margin, but on a percentage basis of revenue was, I don't know, 35% margin. So we're missing a lot of points in the margin that we can produce. And so then, yeah, the finance team is able to see, okay, great. It's not actually what we want it to be. So what do we do differently, or how do we actually implement change in our business? Yeah, big thing was obviously we have a software called Wallogy. That's something we developed in-house with our developers, and spent a lot of time and money on that specifically for painting businesses to help them grow and scale. And I think one of the biggest things that we did in our business with that was create visibility on margin for every single employee in our company, whether you're a sales rep, whether you're a production manager, a coordinator, finance, whatever it is. Every single person in the company knows what was the margin on this job, and then what is the overall margin of our company. And every role here is tied into that in their comp plan. So whether it's a bonus or commission or what have you, everyone here is aligned to those behaviors, because we're all aligned to the same goal of producing margin 41% plus on every single job. I'd say
Sure.
that's like one of the biggest things that we've done at Paris Painting.
Got it. So just creating that, bringing the transparency, bringing the awareness down to the subsidiary, like the boots on the ground level.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
not only the awareness, but also the alignment in their compensation plans too.
Sure.
Right.
Sure.
So their behaviors are now aligned with the business's goals.
I've heard people question or maybe feel hesitant of that, talking about how Paris does that or how Aleph does that, and it's like business owners maybe feel a little uncomfortable like sharing that information with their employees. What could you speak to that, or what would you say to that, of having that kind of transparency with project managers, salespeople, coordinators? Is there any issue with showing them that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't think it's specific to painting companies. I think in all industries, businesses are trying to decide, what do we share with employees and what don't we share with employees. And I came from the finance side. I'm in painting now. And at both companies, there's been a tremendous value on transparency to the employees. And in companies I've been at that have done that, I have just seen a lot more engagement and ownership with the entire team when they feel like they know what's going on and are aligned to the same goals as the owners and the business. So I would say, just from personal experience, being able to provide more transparency to your team is overall a healthier thing and a better thing for the business.
Yeah, I agree, man. I think there's a reality of, I think the worry is always, well, my employees are going to see how much I make, or they're going to have ideas about how much I make. But gross profit, though it is a lead indicator of how much you will end up making at the end of the year, it's obviously, it's not. There's
Right.
there's overhead and all kinds of stuff. We don't share all of those details with the staff, for obvious reasons. Comp and stuff like that is in there, but it actually does far more to empower the team, it seems, than give anybody ideas about the company.
Right. I also think people feel pride over, hey, this is my job and this is what I do. We were able to, as a team, to produce this much in revenue and this much in margin over last year. And they get to see, hey, every year, because you can see it in Wology, every year, what was our revenue, what was our margin, and the growth and the fruit of that is all the hard work that everybody here has done. So I feel like everybody at Paris feels the weight and the reward of being able to see their work, right? It's the fruit of their work. And I think it's a pretty neat thing.
Yeah. All right. I want to talk about an adjacent topic. And this is something that you earlier, you mentioned influencing the culture to be just a team, a company that looks for value, that tries to eliminate waste, and that all of us are kind of like that. I know one of the things that that you led at a quarterly meeting for Paris Painting and Aleph folks was somewhat of a look at like personal finance and personal financial kind of strategy. Again, I think that for some folks who they can be, because finances, both personal and business, are so much behavior. It's more behavior than it is, strategy, theory, or whatever. Yeah. There is probably some business owners that they might even have a pretty successful business, and their personal finances might be a mess, because a lot of that is just personal finances. And it could be, I mean, honestly, man, like I grew up in a family, blue collar family. I was like the second person in my family to go to college. Finances were not talked about. Like I said, I have an accounting degree, and even I felt like, wow, I have an accounting degree from a solid university. I should be like, I should be good with money, right? Yeah. And just as I've gotten older and come into more money, it's like I suck, like, because there's a lot of behaviors that I maybe didn't learn, or I wasn't exposed to it too. If you maybe think back to some of what you touched on or what you talked about when it comes to personal finance, even again, folks who maybe they're running a business, but like their personal financial situation could use some cleanup, a tune up. Is there anything that you would suggest, or again, when it comes to behaviors, when it comes to practices, when it comes to rhythms, like what has served you personally over the years in your personal financial stewardship?
Yeah. I can think of like three things off the bat. I think the first thing, would be just get educated. A lot of people, like you said, don't really know what personal finance is or how to engage in it. And a lot of it is like, it sounds hard. I don't really want to spend the time to do it. I'm just going to ignore it. Right. That can be a lot of people's solution to it. But getting educated on not just personal finance and how to manage your expenses, but also just what is the difference between an asset and a liability. We talk a lot here about Rich Dad Poor Dad in that book, and, putting your money into investments versus spending it. Investment is something that obviously you put money into it and then there's a return on that money when you pull it out. And a liability would be something that you're spending money on. So vacation and those things are not bad. Those are great, but being able to balance the assets and liabilities in your life. So first of all, getting educated. 2 would be getting tools and systems in place. So I think I talked about that with the business, but also personally. Do you have a budget? Do you have a personal budget? Are you actually tracking what you're spending money on? Do you review that and take a look at that? And those tools will be able to help either control your behavior or shape it in the future, right? And then the third would be, this might be unique to me because I feel like I'm always trying to do this, but like, where do I feel like I'm overspending, or where do I feel like I'm not investing enough? And so I'll look at my finances to do that. And I think there are just little things that I've personally picked up over time on tracking my budget and watching it every month. And so this is a true story. This just happened it was this week. I feel like, so my personal like garbage bill went up like doubled over the last like 6 months. And I was like, man, I should probably do something about that. That's frustrating. And probably like a lot of people, it's like, well, it's not a priority. We'll figure that out. But as I was driving home the other day, there was this guy knocking on doors, trying to get people to switch to a new garbage provider. And so I just drove up to him and was like, hey man, I'm looking for a new provider. Why don't you sell me? Tried to sell me on why I should go with you. And
you went to the door knocker.
I went to the door knocker. I knocked
you didn't even let him come to you. Yeah. Nice.
He wasn't like in my neighborhood. And I was like, I don't know if he's going to make it. So I'll just be proactive here, which I think is the point, being proactive about how to make change. And so, I just had him sell me, and he's like, yeah, I'll give you 6 months free and I'll cut your bill like by a third. I was like, sold. Let's get it done. Right. So just looking for opportunities and being proactive to either cut some of the costs that you're spending on, or again, to invest in other things that may be assets. Right.
Yeah, that's great. Maybe talk about, and I think you could take this wherever you want, but I know that it impacts finances very much. And I know this is a personal element for you, and even kind of what we do here at Aleph, but that's like the topic of giving. So I don't know, like finances are, obviously we're in a for-profit endeavor. So, why we talk about conversations that we do on this channel and why we're trying to make money. And then there's different things that we're trying to do with that money. For us here at Aleph, both on the personal side and organizationally, giving those resources away, giving back to certain things. How do you feel like, what's the impact of that, a kind of a giving culture, or maybe a principle of giving?
Yeah.
How does that impact the way you look at finances personally? How do you feel like that's impacted, Aleph? What would you say around that topic?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought it up, because I wanted to talk about that when we were talking about Wology, and I'll get to that in a second. But I think when I gave that talk, our quarterly talk about finances, the title of that was financial stewardship. So it was, how to actually use finances for the best and without wasting, or without just being lack about it, but actually having some intention to the resources that we've been given. Yeah. So I think stewardship and finances, there's a lot of things that go hand in hand with those two. And I think for me personally, I've always tried to be a good steward of finances. I've not tried to waste money on frivolous things. I've also had a principle of giving. So, the biblical principle of tithing, always had that principle and continue to do it today, giving 10% of all the income that I get every month, right? That it's 10% of that I'm not holding on to it. I'm releasing that, and I'm giving that. And, there's biblical principles, right? When you give your first fruits to God, or you just let go of those things, actually more will come into your pockets, more will come into your life. And then you get to be a good steward, and you continue to release what you've been given. Right.
Yeah.
So that's a personal principle that I would encourage everybody to do. I'm doing it, and there's a lot of people here that embrace that principle. And then we've also had that principle as a company. So we really like to partner with our community and give back to our community. Giving is a huge piece of what we do. And we're not just saying that, we actually are putting it in our business model. So in Wallogy, right, I was talking about how you can see the margin on every single job, and you can see the margin as a whole for the whole company. We've also built an expense line in there. So 1% of that margin goes to a giving fund. So it goes to a fund that we've set up to be able to give and donate back to our community, nonprofits, and things like that. And everybody here at the company gets to see, oh, wow, that 1% of revenue, that's a lot of money. That's like $100,000 a year that we're just putting into a fund that we get to give back to our community. And a lot of times, people on our teams get to recommend, hey, this is something that I feel strongly about. Do you guys want to give some money to that? And we've had a number of employees do that. And it's really neat because now everybody's tied into not just the margin for the profit, but also the margin for being able to give that away.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great, man. I think that giving, one of the healthy benefits that I've experienced is it allows you to kind of you obviously you loosen your grip a bit on the resource. And what I've found is when we hold things tight, it's hard to improve or make changes or analyze, or whenever you're just really closed in and tight on something. And giving just inherently kind of opens your hands a little bit to be more open about it. And I think one of the downstream effects of that is you're just more open-minded. You can analyze, you can think. You just don't, your identity is not as wrapped up in it. And so I just think all kinds of good that comes from that. And I'm glad that we do that. I appreciate your leadership and influence around that, and the leaders here at Aleph. Glad to be part of an organization that does that. So, well, man, I think that's a wonderful place for us to wrap it up. Thank you for taking the time to have the conversation.
Yeah.
And I'll say this too, if folks who are listening to this, I know this is a topic where sometimes it's helpful to just hop on a call and compare, contrast, chat with people. So I know, Eric, you'd be up for chatting with folks. When it comes
absolutely.
To the personal finance side of things too, our brother in arms, Jason Paris, I think he does a good job of this too, of just being very intentional about personal finance. And so it even has, I think,
not to brag, but I gave Jason the template.
Okay.
Of how I track finances. Yeah.
Okay. That's where I'm going. So I know that you and him have exchanged templates. So if somebody doesn't have a budget, if somebody doesn't track their own personal finances, reach out to us. We can kick over a template and just to get started personally. And then obviously on the business side, we'd be happy to help too. So, man, again, appreciate the conversation. Again, my name is Hoken. If you want to learn any more about Aleph, what we have going on, just what we're up to, feel free to reach out to us, throw something in the comments. Be sure to subscribe for future episodes. You can reach out to us on our website as well. If you want to, again, learn anything more, you're curious about what we have going on with our partnerships, for whatever reason, happy to connect, happy to share more. Once again, Eric, thanks for joining.
Yeah. Thanks, Hoken. Appreciate it, man.
All right, man. All right, guys. We'll see you next time. Thank you.